Hi everyone, it's GigaBeef here, and today I'm going to show you how to smooth out the recoil of certain weapons using what we know about the mechanics of round recoil so far. I recently made a video on this channel about the new 7 and 40 round and how good it is, and round recoil stats are getting a lot of attention generally at the moment across the community. But there is firstly more to this across multiple calibers outside of 545, and also secondly a way to use small amounts of recoil reducing rounds to greatly benefit our recoil pattern, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Now, I'm not sure if this mechanic was working correctly in previous patches, as these stats have existed for a while and I've not tested them before personally. However, I feel that the community consensus was that it only made a difference to very specific rounds or shells like Magnum Buckshot in previous wipes. Either way, it does seem like all of these that are listed actually work now, or at least for those that I've tested, and is a decent variety of recoil reducing ammo across the calibers in Tarkov. We're going to hone in on the ones that are particularly useful. Listing these on the wiki from most reducing to least reducing, 762 US has 29 pen, which is 3 worse than 762 PS, but it doesn't matter so much because it's not in a sensitive area for penetration when facing either class 3 or class 4 armor. I'm not going to go into mega detail about that today, so if you want more info take a look at this video here, but in short, US ammo has a 76% versus PS's 93% to pen against class 3 on the first hit, and against class 4, US has a 6% chance versus PS's 18%. Yes, PS is better of course, but versus class 3 they both pen most of the time, and versus class 4 they don't, at least until armor damage has been dealt. But this US round has minus 30 recoil, which is actually kinda nuts. Shotguns we're less bothered about for the purposes of this discussion, and US for 545 only has 15 pen, which makes it quite hard to use. But the next one, SB193 for the P90 and the 4.6 subsonics for the MP7 are of serious interest. These give minus 24 and minus 22 recoil respectively on weapons that already have a low base recoil, and makes a big difference to their respective spray patterns. SB193 is the second best round for the P90 and has 35 pen versus SS190's 37, and Subsonic has 36 pen versus the FMJ's 40. With the high fire rate of both of these guns, 35 pen is actually still kind of okay against class 4, which means that both SS193 and Subsonic SX are usable. Below this we have our 7 and 40 round, which is pretty great with 44 pen, and a few others that have some niche interest like AKBS for the PPSH and Blackout VMAX for the MCX, but unfortunately the pen is pretty low on these, so usually it's too much of a trade-off to make. M62 Tracer for 762 NATO gives a little 5 recoil boost, nice to bear in mind, but isn't going to be make or break in most situations I don't think. Okay, so this is all well and good. We can choose to use both the MP7 and the P90 on super close combat mode and take the subsonic variant rounds, because negative recoil rounds are usually subsonic, which means they're pretty slow. As a side note, the speed of sound under regular conditions is around 340 meters per second, so the rounds have to be going slower than this to actually be subsonic. 762 US, SB193 and Subsonic SX are all between 290 and 300 meters per second in Tarkov, which makes it hard to fight at a distance between just the speed in general and how zeroing works currently, but that's a whole other topic. Now, here's the really interesting part. The main complaint about 7 and 40 rounds is that they are too scarce, so what's even the point? You might find 30 rounds in an airdrop, but that's only enough for one magazine. And the others, well, the recoil reduction is great and all, but pen kills in Tarkov, so what can we do about this? Let's think for a moment about the recoil pattern itself for full auto guns. The weapon starts to fire, and the first several bullets undergo extreme recoil. This then gets stabilised by the PMC, and resulting full auto fire typically shoots at some midpoint between the initial shot and the top of the recoil pattern, and is much more stable than at the beginning. The changes made to full auto in 12.12 didn't really mess with this core system per se, just amped everything up to make recoil harder across the board. But the rounds with nice recoil stats have a greatly reduced jump in the first few shots compared to others. This means that if we use a couple of these low recoil rounds at the start, and then switch over to our preferred high pen rounds, we can mitigate the problem of the initial burst of recoil and smooth the pattern out. This works especially well for 7 and 40 because you hardly get any of these in the world, meaning we can use them usefully across many magazines rather than using them all at once. How many rounds to use in the top of the magazine kinda depends on the weapon, but from what I've tested, either 3 or 4 appears to work the best. As we said before, what we want to get rid of is the initial burst as much as possible, and for AKs this appears primarily in the first 3 rounds before the stabilisation kicks in, but for the P90 with a higher rate of fire it's around 4 rounds before this happens. Adding 3 rounds of 7 and 40 to the top of a magazine of Igolnik basically bypasses the mega recoil at the start from Igolnik itself, and the peak of the 7 and 40 spray pattern ends up being similar to the Igolnik steady recoil level, seamlessly transitioning from one to the other. This way the pattern goes from an up and then back down kind of motion to a gradual climb and stabilisation in a way I've never really seen used before. For the P90 and the MP7, given the higher fire rate, it seems we want to use 4 rounds of the low recoil first, and then either the SS190 or FMJ afterwards. This for me led to the most stable pattern, but feel free to tinker with different setups if you want. I did quickly try alternating one of each round in a magazine, so like one Agolnik and one 7 and 40, and then one Agolnik and one 7 and 40 in a sequence, but packing these mags firstly is awful, and it kinda just gave me an average of the two recoils with little benefit to the initial jump, so I don't think we really gain much from doing this. The front loading of the rounds specifically seems to work well because of the recoil pattern itself, and it really helps to make that initial burst much more consistent. Just remember that if you reload in the middle of a mag, the round in the chamber is likely to be one of your high recoil rounds before you get to a top loaded low recoil one underneath from a fresh magazine. And obviously if you take a few bursts from the same magazine, it only helps out for the first one. But I do think this is useful and gives a proper way to enhance our 545 AKs with 7 and 40 without feeling like we're either wasting it or simply don't have enough for it to be useful. With the 3 round method, it goes 10 times further than it would have been packed straight into 30 round mags. So as usual, if you learned something, please consider dropping a like and a comment down below. To see when I'm streaming, you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch, where I'm currently live twice a week, once on Friday at 9 PM UK time for the Scav Talk podcast and a regular Tarkov stream on Saturday at 2 PM UK time. And with all that said, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.